I'm Jeff Cook,
And I'm TJ Wilson.
and this is Around the Circle.
I'm walking slowly, I'm taking my time. All I could talking is starting to rhyme. I'm letting go of lonely, letting go of strife. I just can't get enough of this beautiful life.
The Enneagram is a map of the human personality. It's a tool for navigating relationships, creates language for what motivates us, and helps us to look at the way we look at everything else. Most importantly, the Enneagram is a mirror because sometimes you need help seeing yourself. My name is Jeff Cook. I'm a philosopher in Greeley, Colorado. With me is TJ Wilson, businessman, lover of theology, and Enneagram ninja.
Hello.
My man.
Hey.
We're going to jump back in here with Chase Barron. Chase is a very thoughtful Enneagram 7 student of the Enneagram himself, and we're going to pick up our conversation from last time.
Kind of changing the area here, but where do our types come from?
Do you mean like where did we learn this system, or like how do our types form in us?
Yeah, exactly. How do our types form in us?
The nature-nurture debate, I am firmly in the middle in the sense that I believe that we are born into the world with a certain kind of disposition. We are affected by the world around us, and sort of like, so if we're like leaning in this direction and the world around us shapes us, then we come out a 9. But I think all of that happens so early that if it is more nurture than nature, I don't think we'll ever really be able to see it.
So I only get a chance to talk philosophy occasionally, and when I get my chance. There's a metaphysical question here in terms of what makes you you. Are you just a body? Are you a body and a mind? Are you a body, a mind, and a soul? Some traditions have it that you're only a soul and that you're dreaming. It's taking a step back, what are you is a question here. So if you are only a physical body, then something has to happen between conception and when your brain begins to develop in whatever patterns it does, and it takes the shape that it takes, and your type would emerge. So if that's the case, then it's going to be your genetics plus the nurturing side, and that nature-nurture sort of question comes into play. My own tradition, I believe in a creator God and that has intentions, and I think that God created you. I think that God created this universe, and one of the reasons God created this universe and not a different one is because you're in it. And God envisioned the story and said, I can't imagine creating a universe without Chase. Chase is so essential to the story that I want to unfold. And part of Chase being Chase is your 7-ness. And so for me, that's where type comes in. It's a name. It's like all language. It's just a name that we give to one of the elements of ourselves. It can have real value, but that name is applied to the characteristics, to the motives that the person Chase will eventually have when Chase comes into being. That's how I choose to see it. But that's a metaphysical question. In metaphysics, generally is assumed, it's not proven.
Mm.
The short answer to that question is we don't know because of babies.
Yeah, babies, they're complicated.
Yeah.
So on that note, you can answer either of these. Do animals and or plants have types?
It depends a lot on who you ask.
I think that's a factual question, yeah?
I think there are a lot of people who will vehemently say yes. And I think realistically, like sure, yeah, we have a dog, and she is so similar to my wife, and like there's so much sickness about her. Like just the way that she is in the world, she's always like apologizing for being there and just wants to be like helpful and make sure that nobody's mad at her. And but realistically, we anthropomorphize our pets so much that like I'd be fine with being proven wrong about this, but I have a hard time believing that our pets are sophisticated enough to actually have type.
We started with what is Enneagram? Enneagram's a theory about motive. I suppose the question is, do plants have motives? Or do animals have motives? I think animals probably do have motives. Maybe you can name them. Would their motives, if you could name them and categorize them, would it end up being helpful? On a secondary side, oftentimes questions of these sorts are really fun, and they get us off the path of Enneagram. Really, if you get into it, it's designed to. It's like you need to do some push-ups. You need to do some leg lifts. It's really about when it becomes real valuable and not just trivia. It's about transformation. So always make the first things first, I suppose, is a footnote there.
Yeah, so if it's about growth and transformation, then who cares if plants and animals have type?
Unless you really want your dog to get to that next level. No, but no, I had to ask because Jeff, when you talk about the natural energy of all things and the balance and the higher power, there does come a question about, is there also a balance to animals and plants?
One of my favorite philosophers thinks that trees have souls, and I'm in the midst of trying to get my head around that. So if you have a soul, do you have consciousness, and does your consciousness allow you to choose this over that? And if it does, that's where motive lies. It's like at the bedrock of who we are as personalities is our ability to choose this and not that. And why we choose is motive.
But in that same vein, one of my favorite philosophers thinks that droids have souls. So
droids are fictional beings, and droids have souls.
Droids have souls. Droids definitely have souls. So does our culture reward some types more than others?
Oh, heck yes. Yeah, absolutely. I think all cultures are going to reward types that represent their values. Ours strongly celebrates threeness and particularly male eights.
I think this is true. It's also the case that our culture has gotten really good at cutting down threes and male eights because they've seen their crap on TV for a bit, and I see this a lot with, you can name famous people, and I have guesses of what their types are given their behavior. But when people who know nothing about the Enneagram start talking about this person who's a narcissist, this person whose anger is focused in a very self-indulgent way, I suppose I can see ones who've gotten cut down in the public sphere, and a lot of the double standards that ones can have come out, and it's obvious to all the rest of us watching them on TV, but it's just completely a blind spot to the one that's on the TV that they have huge double standards, which is a failing of a lot of ones.
And different cultures then reward and tear down different numbers, do you think? Or is
absolutely.
it?
Yeah. And we're all, white males in the United States in 2022 for a couple more days. And we have been steeped in our Western culture and in the ideas that are propagated by the people around us, by what success looks like, by what drives what's important in family and whatnot. And I think that there are other cultures out there that we have no idea about, and the things that they celebrate. Families are so much bigger in Latin American culture than in anything that I grew up in personally. And so there might be like 2, 3, 4 type of, or even just 2, 4 type of celebration of these qualities in more Latin American families. And yeah, there's just so much in other cultures that we don't really understand, particularly because we're looking at it through our own cultural lens. Yeah, I've been really interested to read some and hear some about Suzanne Stabile and Russ Hudson in particular teaching in Asia, in Japan, and the difference of what kinds of things are valued over there. It's just different than it is here.
Yeah. And even here, you can find subcultures that praise different types. And that's where I struggle as a 7, because it seems like every subculture that I can find that praises 7s is also like very closely tied to you try to go to a bar and not see slogans that try to convince everybody that they're a 7.
Right.
It's
Right.
really, really phenomenal.
Yeah.
And then I'm sure, I don't know, I'm sure you have your own cultures. Like even TJ, like it's not surprising that you wound up in a coffee shop. I mean,
Right.
it seems like that's a culture that would value a lot of what 9s bring to the table.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, agreed. I like the distinction between here's what the culture values and here's what the family values. My family is much more of a Oklahoma, Texas, lineage, and self-reliance is a high value.
Mm.
Being famous, being successful, being out there, this is not a high value for my family in those ways. However, when Sean Palmer and I, another Enneagram scholar, end up nerding out on history, I want to say we're convinced that every president prior to Biden and after Carter is a 3. And that it just assume that was true for a half minute. That would be interesting. And when we talk about the dynamics of our country and what we want in leadership, we go for these aspirational folks who have their physical look and what they want to convey. They're just highly aware, of the TV screen, of looking successful. Whereas China and Russia do not choose 3s; they choose 8s. And part of the dynamic of those sorts of authoritarian cultures ends up being very much coming out of the type of leaders that they want to embody the head, as it were, of their state. And real interesting elements there. I would argue that Washington's probably a 3. Who else is probably a 3 on these fronts? We had a lot of 7s early in I think Kennedy and Roosevelt are 7s, but long story short, I think recently, since the 80s, we just have wanted that person. And I think that's interesting in terms of culture and what is it the case? Here would be a flip question. I don't think our culture wants everybody to be a 3.
Well, I not necessarily that we want everyone to be a 3, but the things that make a 3 a quote unquote successful 3 are celebrated.
Yeah.
And they're celebrated early and often.
I guess that's it.
Yeah.
Our economic system doesn't reward 2s.
Right. And even like in school and peer groups and like just growing up in the United States, looking at what things are valued, what things are said, like these are important and you should learn how to do this. There's like 3 and male 8s.
Yeah. And I mean, 7s wind up with money, but that's usually by accident.
Right.
They blow it after they get it too.
Yep. So looking at the societal expectations and then also the familial roles, I know several people, and particularly female friends of mine, who struggle to know their type because they're not sure if they are their type or if this is the type that their family or their culture has expected them to be, and they've just lived up to it. And a lot of time that's Tunis. Right. So the real question is, how do you know if you've found the right type for yourself or if you are just fulfilling a role that your society or family expects of you?
I think this comes back to what we were talking about in the very beginning, that it's a lot about self-awareness and becoming more and more in tune with your own behavior and particularly your unconscious behavior, and bringing in other people that you trust to tell you the truth about yourself, because a lot of times we can't really see these things. There's so much. The other side of us celebrating 3s and 8s is that we, it's just another way of sort of trying to force people into boxes. And so like particularly female 2s are taught they're supposed to be a certain way. And because that's the values that they were given. And then they become 20 something and they find out, oh, they don't actually care about these things at all. And there's nothing wrong with that. But sometimes when you have sort of given over so much to these types of personality traits to taking on someone else's expectations, it takes a lot of work, a lot of introspection, and a lot of really helpful guidance from other people to get you to see that you were trying to fit a square peg into this round hole. And if you stop, you'll be free.
If you wanted to be sure that you typed yourself correctly, what is one way to know that you're on the right track?
For me, it has been reading, continually consuming material, hearing more and more people talk about their experience, and then it's sort of like trying on glasses, seeing if that fits. I tell this story often. I was reading Beatrice Chestnut's big book with the purple tree, and I had an existential crisis for 2 days because I was certain from her from her presentation of a certain type of 2 that I had mistyped myself as a 9 when I was actually a 2. And just allowing yourself to go through that process, but continually coming back to what is my ultimate, like, what do I really want? And the thing that snapped me out of that crisis was, oh yeah, 2s actually care what other people think about them. I don't care what other people think about me the way that 2s do. And so no, that like it just keep coming back to that sort of center. What is your primary motivation? If it's right, it will feel right when you come back to it every time.
Yeah, I agree. Hearing other people share their stories and having that deep ping, oh, that's what I'm like. That is exactly how I navigate the world, is valuable. Also, as a secondary, and not a lot of work has been done on this front, but there is a scientific side that desires a lot of work at the college, at the university level, and that would be, does the Enneagram have predictive power? If it does, then it's anchored in something in reality. But in my experience, the fact that I don't know when I type, I don't know certain truths about ones, but then I stumble upon them and they actually predicted, but my behavior 10 years ago, 12 years ago. Like, it's like, oh, there it is. That's why I routinely did X, Y, and Z. I'm really excited for New Year's. New Year's is a time to get on a list out. Here are all the ways that I'm going to make my life better and move all this stuff forward. It's like we're celebrating improvements. 5 years ago, it would have been 10 years ago when I didn't know the Enneagram. That's how I did New Year's. I mean, it's just obvious in my mind and heart now that it's a very one way of coming to what really is just a date on a calendar, in my interpretation of it in terms of how our culture celebrates it,
Yeah. And for a 7 after this ridiculously chaotic holiday season, and I'm flying to 1, I'm also very excited to get my life in order because I'm getting stressed out.
Get everything back on track.
Well, you're on vacation, correct?
Yeah, it's brutal.
So you're expressing actually what may be a healthy side to your 7-ness. It's that you're resting. It's time to recharge a little bit, and you're using some of those tools in your stress number to get yourself grounded as you push back in, especially with aggressive types with 3s, 7s, and 8s. Those are the sorts that I think really push into their stress numbers a lot during vacation time, as it were. And just like my 3 wife just wants to get off stage, hang at the house. My 8 child just wants to go into their bedroom away from school. They don't need to be in control right now. Get on Discord.
And I'm on Discord, and I'm a working adult.
That's like
I don't know anything about it. So
all right, we were kind of riffing on stress numbers. So, in short, what is a stress number?
So there's a lot of movement in the Enneagram, and we have availability to sort of pick up behavior from other types. And when we are in stress, we consistently move and pick up behavior from one particular type. Each type picks up behavior from a different type. And that that can be done in a really healthy way. That can be done in an unhealthy way. We can get really good things there. We can get really bad things there. And it's sort of like finding ourselves in a new situation. We try to pick up other tools.
Trying to make this quick. If you're not a 3, 6, or a 9, what happens is when you are in stress, you shut down your primary center. So for 7s, you're going to shut down your head and you're going to push into action in your heart, and you're going to take on the characteristics of a 1 who one's intuit their feelings. That's how they are in the world. For myself, I go to 4, I shut down action and I start thinking about my emotions. And that's, I think, the best way to think about stress numbers now is that what you're really doing is shutting down your primary center. For 3, 6s, and 9s, and TJ can build on this, I think it's that you're shutting down your motive. And 3, 6s, and 9s, I think when in stress, will shut down their motive and go to a number in which they almost take on a different kind of motive. So the 3 who wants lots of attention when in stress doesn't want any attention anymore. Now they just want to be peaceful. The 9 doesn't necessarily need to make things calm anymore because that hasn't been working, and they go to 6 space and get a lot more active in a reactive kind of way to the world around them.
I think that's that taps into a lot of the healthy response. Like when we do that, when we recognize ourselves in stress, we have access to that, and we can sort of set aside our primary motive with the tools that are available at our stress point. 6s who just want to be safe and let someone else tell them how to be safe and be protected. In going to 3, it's like there's you can do it. You can do it by yourself. Yeah, and let go of a lot of that self-doubt because there's work to do. But I think it is all about, for every type, it is all about picking up other tools because what you're used to isn't working.
Right. To double down on that, like there's something about our stress number that it is paired with us bailing our primary motive. I'm still looking for language here, but if our motive and way of being in the world was working to solve our problems, we wouldn't get stressed out. We get stressed out because stuff isn't working in this space. And so it's almost like, it's like the velociraptors testing all the places in the fences. Is it where we gotta try some other ways of being in order to fix this? And when we get real stressed out, it seems like you're intuitively we might say, I need to shut down this part that is normally my go-to, and use some tools without it. I have an intuition that's what that is, but we're still working on it. We're going to do a conference on this in 2 months. I was saving it for January. I'm going to do this study. It's going to be great.
But this, in hearing you guys just talk about stress number, for me, stress number was one of the things, to go back to the previous question, identifying the stress move sold me on what type I am.
Sure.
When you start looking at the Enneagram as a system for exposing your shadow, and you learn of the sins and the fixations, and then see what you do when you're at a low point. For me, that indulgence in 7 and order in 1 sold. That's when I was so sold on typing, and then the security move too. Which, next note, what is your security number?
So this is all sort of moving in the opposite direction. So if you ever look at the symbol, that's what all of these lines are. Is one direction from each type is a stress move, and the other direction is a security move. And that's sort of like when you're in the ruts of life, when you know what's going on, when you feel comfortable. Not necessarily when you're doing really well, but when you sort of feel like you're doing well. There are tools available to you at the other type to help you have more fun, help you do something better about whatever it is you're trying to accomplish.
We like the term security and not integration here, because what's really happened is that you have fulfilled your motive somehow, and that's why you feel secure. So for me as one, I feel like I'm good and in control. That's all I really want in life. And all of a sudden I feel good. And because my motive has been checkmarked, as it were, I can bail my motive in the same way that I bailed my motive when I go to stress. Now I'm kind of bailing my motive when I have had it fulfilled because it's no longer check markable. So what are we going to do now? And I move in that way towards 7. And what happens in 7 space, I need to remind myself if this is true of all the numbers, but my repressed center really comes up. So I'm thinking repressed, but when I move to 7, my thinking repression kind of goes away. This may not work for 7s and for 2s. I think every other number, their repressed center elevates in there.
I think that's accurate.
Yeah, it might not work for the shock points as well.
It does.
So there's something about that. Like again, if we're heart, mind, and body.
And it's sort of like if you feel like you have the thing that you're driving at, then you don't have to work to get it anymore. So there's like, what else are you going to do now?
Yeah.
So for ones who are trying to make everything better and like improve the space around them and themselves and whatnot, like when they feel like that work is something they don't have to be doing right now, then they can actually go to 7 and find joy, find more opportunity, find new things to do. They don't have to keep working on the thing in front of them because they can go find something more.
I assume for 7s, you have all the options out there, but if you are actually feeling safe and not needing to ensure that safety is primary, and I always have a new island to jump to, it will allow your mind, again, here's kind of the energy thing, it allows your mind to go from being spastic and all over the place to really centering, because you don't need to worry about where am I going to jump. Since that's taken off the table, you feel safe. So all of your mental energy can begin to hone. And that sure looks like 5 space to me. Yeah.
Yeah. I know that I'm healthy when I finish a book.
Huh? Yeah.
You know,
completing tasks.
Yeah. And staying focused in one domain for long enough. You know, I love to get excited about topics and buy books and then get into them. And then before you know it, you're excited about another topic. So, yeah, when you have enough time and satisfaction to not see the next shiny object, that is indeed when you can move to 5 in a healthy way.
Might be worth talking about how security and health aren't always the same thing. It is the case in what you're saying is spot on, but you feel good finishing the book and are naming it as health. Whereas something has happened to get you to the spot where you're able to focus. Yeah.
Oh, don't get me wrong. Yeah. I think I moved to 5 in unhealthy ways more than I moved to 1 in unhealthy ways. You know,
yeah.
Like I think that the stress and security, and you guys, I think this is totally up in the air, but I think anybody can move to stress or security in healthy or unhealthy ways, and I just tend to move to 1 more effectively than I move to 5. Tend to move to security, or tend to move to stress more effectively than I move to security.
Yeah, it's a tool.
Yeah. And so we have these 2 numbers that we can move to in stress and security. We also have 2 numbers on either side of our number, which are the wings.
Yep.
Briefly, what are wings and do they matter?
They are the type on either side of you, and they can add some flavor to your particular type. Like there's 9 billion people in 9. Are we at 9 yet? There's 9 billion people in the world, and there's been 108 billion souls in the history of humanity, and if there's only 9 types, we have to figure out how to distinguish each individual person somehow. So wings are part of what adds flavor, and at their most basic, that's what they are. At their once you start to get into a little bit more like intentional, what are the wings? I think they add some nuance and add some real, like you get more opportunity to draw on some tools that are on either side of you. Ultimately, they are simultaneously way less important than a lot of people make them out to be, and also they're a significant part of who you are and who you might be.
If I were studying wings for the first time, the thing I'd do is I'd find the list of the sins and the list of the virtues. And I think those are the places that you really can find value in studying wings. Wings are balancing points. So you have 2 wings. As a 7, you have an 8 wing and you have a 6 wing. And they are tools to push into in exactly the same way as your stress number. It's also the case, however, in my experience, that our wings also have a sinister side. I struggle with the pride of 2, and I also struggle with the sloth of 9 as a 1. And I need to know that about myself, that I am struggling with not just the sin of 1s, which is anger at myself, but I also struggle with pride in that I've done so much for these people that characterizes 2s, and I also struggle with the inactivity of 9ness and the sloth of not caring about what's important at times, and that can be very helpful to know. It's also very helpful to be able to list the virtues of your wings, because those are tools that you can grab hold of as well.
Jeff's a peacemaker in his family.
Right.
So, obvious follow-up is, in short, what are subtypes and how important are those?
So subtypes are sort of like dividing the pie a little bit further, and it's like our the way that we instinctually put our energy out into the world, or how we use our energy to gain our primary motive. The 3 main subtypes are self-preservation, like what my primary motive is about me and myself and the space immediately around me. Social, which is my main motivation, is going to be about my place in the group and the group as a whole. And then sexual, or one-to-one, is about me and one other person, and whoever is in front of me, and my partner, or my closest coworker, or me and my kid, or whatever, whoever is the person that is closest to me at that particular moment. That's where my energy is going to focus, is on that relationship.
I love this idea that subtypes are the relational energy that you have that allows you to get what you want. And so you have a motive, that's what Enneagram's about, but there's a relational dynamic to all of us. And so we have a relationship with the wider group, we have a relationship with just the people in front of us, and we have a relationship with ourselves. And just being able to name that can be valuable. Some of us will push really hard into one of those 3, or we'll feel most comfortable in one of those areas. And if somebody uses the term subtype, what they're saying is you are the type of person who really pushes towards the community, or you're really the type of person who pushes towards one-on-one interactions. TJ and I hold the view that we have some preferences, but it's not part of our type. It's much more like tools that we can use. Or we stole the illustration from Sean Palmer, which is it's more like rooms that you go into to get the thing that you need to. Sometimes you don't go to the basement, but it's there, and sometimes it's important.
When you need to do laundry, you have to go into the basement, but you don't need to do laundry all the time every day.
So some people don't like being around big crowds, but sometimes you got to be a part of the 10-person community, or you got to go to Christmas dinner. And so you got to, put it into gear and engage that part of yourself. Some people love Christmas dinner,
Yeah.
and that's their wheelhouse. And that would be their, quote unquote, that would be their instinct. That'd be their subtype. They would be more of a social type.
So for me, like 80% of the time when somebody new or somebody's just getting into the Enneagram, they really want to figure out their type, their dominant wing, and their subtype. And that's the first thing that they want to work on.
Yeah.
I would say, is that a mistake for people? And should they be focusing on something else? Could they be putting themselves in a box?
When this issue comes up, I usually tell people, don't worry about wings because they're not as important as you're making them. And don't worry about subtypes because it's just going to make everything muddy. Figure out your primary type and stay there for a really long time. Your wings offer flavor, but they're not as important. With a handful of exceptions, they're not as important as people make them out to be. And this is just part of the language of the trendiness of it, is like you can take the test and learn your dominant wing and your subtype and blah, blah, blah. But the tests don't mean anything anyway. So it's all just, it's unhelpful distractions trying to like figure out which group you fit in, where what you should really be doing is figuring out how your type has informed your personality.
If I got really into personal finance and the first thing I wanted to do was study how to get out of capital gains taxes, it might be kind of strange. It's like, let's make sure you got a budget first and that you're actually putting some money away and that you might have something to sell at a profit such that you could actually eventually be doing so well financially where you might have to worry about capital gains tax. But that's kind of how I feel about them as well. It's like it's stuff that's just way down the road if you're going to use the tool in really effective ways. If it helps, hook you, I'm down with that. Like if it's helpful for me, I'm a one wing 9 with a sexual subtype. If that helps me get into it, then great, I suppose. But it does make things muddy. The better places to focus, as we've kind of say, is if you can name your healthiest self, if you can name your shadow, if you can shore up your oppressed center with the information, those are the places to go. And again, I suppose we did a podcast on this. It's just a standalone. We couldn't make it into a book. It would be kind of strange. So we got a podcast that's just called Start Here, and the last 7 episodes are just the steps. But going step by step, I think is our steps. I think are just a better way to go on this front.
It's also the case that we are there's different schools of thought about whether wings and subtypes are fixed, and we do not believe that they're fixed. So to say that I am a 9 with a 1 wing is technically false in the way that I see the system. I believe that I have both wings and I have access to both of them. And to say that like I am for sure primarily a self-preservation type, but I have access to all of those things, and I'm not self-preservation 100% of the time. So it's not helpful to me to put these definitive labels on something that I do not think is fixed.
Yeah, I suppose what could happen, this might be helpful, is if somebody took the test and it told you your wing, what it's really doing is exposing where you're out of balance. And so this is actually, it's not that this is your identity, but this is where you really need to work. You need to push into your other wing more, 1. And 2, this is showing like the social, relational place that you commonly go to get what you want. And perhaps balance would mean widening that, stretching that. And so, not a good thing to say this is my identity. For TJ and I, the whole point really of Enneagram is finding balance, that you have tools in your stress number, your security number, and your wings. You have tools there to find health and happiness, and that a real name for what that looks like is something like balance.
Yeah. To borrow Spanish verbs, it's estoy, not soy. It's where you temporarily are, not where you are eternally.
Yeah.
And this is a problem that pops up to pull back from personal training for several years. I mean, everyone wants to know their exact body composition, their VO2 max. They want to focus on high intensity interval training and getting into ketosis before they think about, could I eat 3 healthy meals a day? Like, and it's a really easy way to miss the mark on the hard work. I mean, it's way harder to look at. For me, it's way easier to try to figure out 7 wing, 8 social. Like that's way easier than fears, fixations, heart's message, holy ideas. That's hard stuff that you generally want to avoid.
Yeah.
Well, and notice here that you're also saying like that there's a difference between the figuring out the tough work and doing something that you don't want to do. Like figuring out your real subtype, figuring out like where and when you lean into which wing. Like this is tough work that you should be doing in community with people that you really care about, and it's going to potentially take years of introspection. But it's not emotionally hard. Like it's easier than facing the hardest things about the darkest things about yourself. And for 7s, it might be easier. Like for some types, it might be easier to do this kind of hard work versus this other kind of hard work.
I imagine there's something to be said on this front of just wanting some attention or just wanting to perhaps to know about yourself at a certain level. And it's
Or to be part of the cool kids
Yeah.
club. Everyone's talking about the Enneagram and everyone knows their wing. I better make sure I know my wing so when I tell people, they don't think I don't know what I'm talking about.
so, no judgment. This is, I suppose, more for teachers. If you're teaching this stuff, go ahead. 9 is plenty. 9 is plenty.
Yeah. There are so many questions. Like when you immediately show people about discuss it. It's hard for people to wrap their heads around 9 types being able to define all of humanity. And we don't really need to go there, but we can if you think it's a worthwhile explanation as to how 9 types can explain all of the people.
Sure.
Right.
All language categorizes, and it takes really big things, lots of tables, all become this one word. Lots of books out there, but they all are specified as a book with this one word. And that's all that the Enneagram is doing. It's just giving a very clean, quick name to something, our motive, that many of us, experience and can talk about. If you were to look at colors, there are countless shades of red, but the word red is really valuable. If you are a musician and you play a C, are you playing it through a tuba? Are you playing it on a xylophone? Are you playing it, in the upper register, the lower register? Well, the C doesn't specify all the possible countless variations of C, but it's still a really useful term. And if you start doing music theory, you're going to learn here are the notes, and you get your head around the notes and how they interact with each other, and then you can apply it to the specific instrument that you play, and that's how Enneagram works in my mind.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we've talked a lot about wings. We've talked about subtypes, and these are good ways of like really quickly drilling into like if you really want to get into that type of like specificity, then a 9 with a strong 8 wing who is also self-preserving is different from the other options for that wing and different from the other options for the other wing, and then like you keep expanding, and there's actually 108 types, and the more you get into just understanding the dynamism, there's farther to drill down. And the idea that there's 108 billion souls, 9 billion people on the planet now, but there's only 9 different types. It's not necessarily that there are 9 types of people. It's that there's 9 ways of seeing. There's 9 primary motivations. And even some of those are really related to each other, because you could shrink it further into there's 3 intelligence centers, and there's 3 stances, there's 3 ways of looking at time. And once you start to fold all of this onto each other, it gets really expansive in and of itself. And then you remember that we're also shaped, and the armor that we're putting on is shaped by different hands and our circumstances and our culture and the values of our family and all of these other things, which means that at 37, TJ Wilson is a particular person because of my type and also all of the things that have happened to me in my life, regardless of, and all of the things that happen into the life of the people that impacted me in my life, my parents, my teachers, my sister, my partner, my best friend, like all of those people impacted me significantly and got me to this place. So reality is just so much more complicated than we give it credit for sometimes. And the idea that there's only 9 ways of seeing is just like this little tiny speck of the complexity of the individual person.
And yeah, it's important to say this is a person. That would be, I'm categorizing you with that word. You're not a cat. You're not a tree. It's not taking away from your humanity. Actually, it's saying you're a human being to say you're a person. But so too the numbers. It's just a name for motive, but it's a helpful name. It's all language in some sense is a tool. You pull out your Foucault. It's all about having control over your environment and yourself, and that can be incredibly beneficial,
Yeah.
Or it can be weaponized, I suppose. If you really want to dive into Foucault, you can take all this material and hurt somebody with it. That was a side note. I didn't mean to go down that road.
Now, question in just being enthusiastic about this and trying to type people I see on TV, not people that I actually know. Is it harder to type very healthy people or very unhealthy people?
I think it's a lot harder to type really healthy people because health includes maturity and balance and integration and a lot of the things that we've talked about that are sort of goals of our of this work. And if you're aiming in that direction, then you're going to become a more whole person, and it's going to be harder to see the layers that you had put on. And unhealth, I think, it showcases a lot of the things that are much more visible about type. The sins come out in much bigger ways. The fixations are more present. The ways that we express and lean into our unhealth, I think, are usually more visible and more recognizable from the outside. But I definitely would not say that is a 100% this will always work kind of rule.
I agree. This is also perhaps one of the reasons why people think that the goal is to get rid of your number, is because when they look at healthy people, they're very hard to type. So clearly they've gotten rid of their number. I don't even know what type they are. And that may be, that might be a reason why we have that view of the Enneagram itself. But in my experience, the people who are healthiest, they still have motives. They're tempered, balanced motives, but the motive of a very, very healthy 7 is still going to be different from the motive of a very, very, very healthy 6.
Yeah.
Spot on. So maybe to round this out, we could, as quickly as we can, so I think it might be interesting to try going around the circle and say if an average health Enneagram number wanted to just get a little better in their Enneagram health this year, what's one thing they could maybe focus on as a focal point for improvement? And I think we could do this like pretty quickly in a sentence, hopefully, and not elaborate too much. But, say, stop me if this doesn't sound like a good idea, but like say if an average health Enneagram 1 wanted to improve themselves using the Enneagram a little bit this year, like what would be one area to focus on?
Twofold. One, we have that podcast Steps, which is a great place to jump in. But we actually were going to record, perhaps we'll do this a little bit more elaborately on something of exactly the sort, where I thought focusing on your hazards is a great place to start.
I think that for all types, one of my constant refrains is stance work, getting in touch with your repressed center. And for ones, that would be thinking and working on productive thinking. So all types, I think, can do stance work. And I think that is work that we'll be doing for the rest of our lives.
Stance work is always going to be worthwhile. And by stance work, we mean you have a repressed center, and really working on your repressed center matters. And so actually the 3 of us are different. So I really need to work on thinking and ways to get my head around things. 1s, 2s, and 6s all need to work on productive thinking. And TJ is a 9, alongside 4s and 5s, getting their bodies engaged in things that are valuable and that matter. And for Chase is a 7. 8s and 3s likewise are feeling repressed. Finding those ways of getting productive thinking about your emotional life, the whole kaleidoscopic beauties of all your feelings, and getting language for your inner emotions and the emotions of others can be incredibly valuable.
Awesome. Yeah. So stance work, step 1.
Yeah.
As the new year rolls.
Awesome. I guess one concluding question, and you can take this personally or or communally, but I guess what is the ultimate goal of continuing to study the Enneagram for so many years?
I think that we are not ever finished. We as human beings, we're constantly moving in a direction, and we will never be finished. We will never be perfected. We will never be completed works, and that means that for our entire lives we have work that we can do. We can always be a little bit better. as we change, the Enneagram continues to offer a dynamic pathway toward change and growth and continuing to become a more whole person who is good to my family, good to my friends, good employee, good employer, or whatever, good steward of the world, interacting in ways that are helpful and move everything toward a better whole.
Yeah, it brings it full circle for me. The reason I keep studying Enneagram is, well, you are aiming at happiness. Everything you do aims at happiness. Every person that's ever existed, all they're aiming at is happiness. There's lots of miserable people in our world. They're not hitting happiness. They're not actually grabbing hold of happiness. The question is, what does it look like for you to be happy? And in my experience, and when I look at people who appear to be happy, it seems like they're emotionally sound. They got their relationships are healthy. They have some real self-understanding. All of these things are enhanced by the Enneagram. So I suppose I'm looking forward in the next 10 years to getting a little bit more detailed understanding of Enneagram stuff, to start applying it to different arenas that I haven't before, to really start using it to ask other people questions about themselves and strengthen relationships, because it's a great gateway for me to connect with others as they talk about their own inner life. All of those, I think, lead to me being a happier, healthier person.
Awesome. Yeah, shows you what to work on.
Yeah.
I'm going to take the steering wheel back, I suppose, because we need to land the plane, yeah?
Yeah.
Chase, you're the man. Thank you so much for leading us in some questions. But we've been talking a lot. Before we sign off, anything on your mind, Chase? Anything we're saying before we land the plane?
No, just thank you guys so much for doing what you do. I think it's more of an honor to me than it is to you. I mean, these are the questions that I want to ask you guys anyway. So I have the platform to come on here and hear two of my favorite Enneagram people talk about the Enneagram. So this has been a blessing, and I'm looking forward to seeing where things go for Around the Circle in all of the years to come.
Come on.
Yeah.
Us too.
So you got anything else, TJ?
I got nothing. This has been I guess I can't follow I got nothing with the whole thing. Yeah, this has been a blast. I appreciate your thoughts about this and bringing a new kind of perspective and on what kind of questions need to be asked. And yeah, this has been great.
As we sign off, obviously, we always appreciate stars on Spotify or iTunes. You can find all of our work. We have about 100 episodes, obviously, on this feed, but we have a second feed called Start Here, which for you or others who are just getting into the material, that's a great place to begin. Music is by The Collection and by the Brian Claxton. And if you are in the Colorado area, the first weekend of February, we're going to be doing a conference in Greeley, Colorado on stress and security. And you can find all the information for that. And for our monthly gatherings, which Chase mentioned, we do monthly gatherings online. All of that is at aroundthecircle.org. And that's what I got. He's TJ Wilson. He's officially awesome. Chase, you need a moniker. I need to think one up. I wasn't prepared. This is the first time I mentioned this offline. This is the first time I've come to one of these podcasts with no notes. Just like, this is going to be fun. We're just going to talk. And anyway, that's what I got. So no moniker. That would have taken, I can't just screw around there. You're going to be known for this for the next 7 years as we have you on as a guest.
The man with no moniker?
The man with no moniker.
There we go. There it is.
It's Chase Barron, the man with no moniker. It's TJ Wilson. He's officially awesome. I'm Jeff Cook. Who you aren't isn't interesting. And when you take the wheel from somebody, don't crash into a tree.
Hey, we landed.
We were all just along for the ride, so you got us there.